Hi, everyone. My name is Philippa Putlitz. I am the Upstream Coordinator with BGC Okanagan. I'm presenting to you today virtually from the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. Upstream Canada, on which I will be presenting today, is an early intervention strategy to prevent youth homelessness and school disengagement. It was developed by Making the Shift as a project of the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness and Away Home Canada. Adopted from Upstream Australia's model, Upstream Canada has 2 bi-coastal cities piloting local adaptations, each of which launched in early of 2021. It uses a universal screening tool to identify young people in school that might be flying under the radar and creates an avenue for them and their families to get connected to supports to build their resilience and well-being as protective factors against school disengagement and homelessness. This is the journey of the city of Kelowna and how we have adapted a national model on the ground of our community, working collaboratively across sectors to plan, design, implement, and sustain a new way of working to prevent homelessness from occurring in the first place. We have a few objectives today, but overall, my goal here is to recognize that preventing youth homelessness and school disengagement is a great ideal. It's a big task, and it can feel daunting to get started. So I hope to provide you with enough details that will leave you with tangible ideas of how you might go ahead or might go about adopting Upstream Canada's model and adapting it to suit the needs, gaps, and resources currently existing in your community. On our agenda today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kelowna's current situation as it pertains to youth homelessness. I will share with you how Kelowna stumbled upon and brought Upstream Canada into our community. I will share with you some of the major pieces of the puzzle that took place to plan and design a localized version of Upstream Canada that works to meet our community's needs and capacity. And then I will present a frontline perspective of how Kelowna went about implementing the core structural components of the model, including the student needs assessment, validation interviews, triage, and case management. This is an iterative learning process, right? So I will talk a little bit about our successes and challenges. We really were flying the plane as we were building it. Lastly, I will share with you where we're at today, where we're going, and what we are dreaming of. So BGC Okanagan is unique in that BGCO's downtown youth center also functions as the Okanagan's only youth-specific shelter. According to our 2020 annual report, we've provided beds for 39 young people aged 13 to 18 in 2020. I've listed our shelter diversion attempts here, as our shelter diversion program was really our first go at prevention work. It has proven to be very significant in deterring young people from experiencing homelessness. However, we hope that Upstream, as it starts in schools while youth are still housed, will function to work us out of a job, assuring young people never have to make it to the doorsteps of our shelter. I've also noted here that the city of Kelowna created a task force called Journey Home, and it was developed in partnership with Away Home Canada, Away Home Kelowna, the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, and Turner Strategies. It was created to develop a 5-year strategy to address homelessness in our community. Their March 2018 report named Launching Upstream one of our community's top 10 actions. Pretty cool, right? But how did Upstream make its way to Kelowna in the first place? Upstream Kelowna would not have come to fruition in this way if it were not for Sarah McKinnon, the Director of Youth Services, formerly the Director of Youth Housing of BGC Okanagan. She attended a conference, much like this, where Upstream Canada was being presented. She asked the question, how do we get Upstream Canada into our community? And she broke the ground to make it happen. So now we're at February 2018 and in 2018 in February, BGCO took part in a community design lab alongside many community partners to discuss identified trends and gaps, as well as services and structures that are already in place. As a community, it was determined that Upstream was a necessary project to support ending homelessness, and that due to BGCO's experience with youth homelessness and strong community connections, BGCO would be best suited for this pilot as its official community-based lead. Having brought our community partners on board, as well as our local government, to launch a collaborative cross-sector project, we were then ready to make a partnership with Upstream Canada official. And we did that in July of 2018. All right, moving into our pre-implementation phase. Next on the docket was to bring our school district on board. We know from the 2018 Without a Home study conducted by the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness that 40% of individuals experiencing chronic homelessness reported having had their first experiences before they turned 16. Another study called What Would It Take of over 100 young people with lived experience overwhelmingly determined that young people feel that their homelessness could have been prevented had supports been put in place while they were still in school. It was these statistics and the advocacy of Sarah McKinnon, as well as Away Home Kelowna, that went before the Health Promoting Schools Committee in March of 2019. We were asked to come back to the school district on 2 more occasions, providing information on the project each time. It wasn't until February of 2020, right about when COVID hit, that we had our final presentation to the school district and had submitted letters from parents supporting the Upstream model, where Upstream was given the go-ahead to survey all grade 8 students in 2 local schools using the recommended and York Ethics approved opt-out consent process. Now, this was a huge success for us and greenlit the allocation of funds and hiring of myself, the Upstream coordinator, to begin strengthening relationships and convening our partners in the design and implementation of Upstream Kelowna. BGCO funded the vast majority of the pilot, allocating funds to 4 other stakeholders, as well as 1 full-time case manager under my supervision. All right, stakeholders and partners, we ready? I set forth to connect with each of our stakeholders, namely ARC Youth and Family Programs, the Bridge Youth and Family Services, Kelowna Friendship Society, the Foundry Kelowna, School District 23, and of course, BGC Okanagan. I met individually with each of the schools to determine their readiness, and each youth serving agency to lay out their roles within case management and their shared leadership as a part of a steering committee. I created a spreadsheet listing various roles, including drug and alcohol support, family mediation, school support, and more. Each stakeholder played to their strengths and their capacity and provided me with a number of referrals that they might be able to manage. It was through this work that we were able to determine that we could offer supports of upwards to 52 students and their families. And then we were able to finalize the details of our memorandums of understanding, assuring commitment to the project for the first year. In February of 2021, Upstream Kelowna had assembled representatives across agencies to form our steering committee. Together, we investigated and adapted each core component of Upstream Canada to suit the needs of our schools and our community. We established a timeline for implementation and agreed to expectations and values. The team came prepared. The team informed each nitty-gritty detail from the student needs assessment itself to facilitating the assessment and collaborative case management. Today, we meet once a month for 1 hour and have begun to tackle larger community-wide issues that have presented themselves as barriers to resilience for young people and their families. And we will begin to advocate for change. This is that large-scale impact stuff that Upstream has a great potential for. But if we are going to make large-scale changes within our community, we are going to have to bring everyone on board. So Upstream Kelowna created an Upstream launch event on Zoom with multiple speakers, including the mayor, the superintendent of our school district, and others. We included a young person with lived experience as a keynote speaker. And we created a montage video of young folks who spoke to how a program like Upstream or early school-based intervention may have impacted the trajectory of their lives. Our launch event was recorded and is viewable on YouTube, and it's been useful for informing new partnerships. Implementation phase. All right. We then we made sure to connect with the parent advisory councils in that month as well. We gave them an opportunity to ask us questions directly about the project and the work that we'd hoped to do. We were nervous and we were prepared for pushback, but we learned quickly that parents were interested in the project and very supportive. One parent even shared their story of housing a young person on their couch and having never thought of it as homelessness before. It was a great opportunity to raise awareness and to build trust. The school district had made the decision that Upstream would facilitate its first assessment in the spring of 2021 and its second in the fall. In the end, this was advantageous for all parties, allowing for another iterative learning opportunity and for our partners to focus our capacity on one school at a time. So by the end of the month, we facilitated our first assessment. We used 6 facilitators from various agencies partnered with the project. We agreed to using an online link instead of a paper copy. This was beneficial as it expedited the return of our first analysis. Within 1 week of the assessment, we had our results. Of 220 participants, a 94% response rate, 34% were flagged with risk indicators. Interestingly, 67% of those identified as Indigenous, both status and non-status. Knowing our total capacity to support case files was set at 52, and that many students might decline a validation interview, might decline supports after an interview, might already be well connected, or might otherwise just have had a bad day on the day of the assessment, we did decide to try and approach all 75. All right, validation interviews. We used a list of students that were identified through the analysis to validate each student's risk. We had a couple of stumbling blocks here, and we had to improvise on our approach strategy. So ultimately, we decided to call each student to the office in order of risk to bring them to a quiet space in the school with one of 2 upstream case managers in 10 to 30-minute increments. Within 3 hours, we had 12 interviews complete, 10 of which resulted in consent to triage. We thought we were doing great. Then we had to come to a complete stop. We found that teachers' classrooms were being disrupted. There was like chatter between the students, and one student was particularly triggered by the time that they'd returned to class. So we spoke with the vice principal and agreed to go back to the drawing board before creating any more disturbances. It was a few weeks later that we went back in. We renamed our interviews to check-ins. We removed language around risk of homelessness. We provided booking links for students to book their own check-ins and utilized the school's resource teacher to approach each student with the opportunity. These changes allowed us to complete 65 of the 75 check-ins before the end of the school year and increase consent given to connect with guardians by 100%. Our team was able to introduce ourselves, the project, and the next steps directly after each check-in, as well as extend their first invitation to family support. We had many results from the check-in, but the one that I would probably love to highlight for you here today is that 95% of those who consented to triage requested support for mental health. And this was a trend that we continue to see today and that we have seen throughout the project. Moving on to triage. So during the check-ins, our case managers used a tool that we called the validation interview checklist. It helped guide the interview using open-ended questions to learn about different areas of students' lives, including at school, at home, and interpersonally. It allowed us to get insight into supports they might currently have and supports that they need. We worked with Upstream Australia to develop that checklist and found it to be very successful. Each student signed off on it right before they consented to triage. We use the validation interview checklists to inform what I call my triage spreadsheet. This spreadsheet listed each consenting student, their relevant details, and a recommendation for referral. We presented the spreadsheet to our steering committee at our very first triage in May 2021. Frontline case managers were invited, but all agency representatives were in attendance. We presented and triaged 10 case files to coordinated supports over 2 hours in a Zoom format. Due to the pause in check-ins, we did have to have a follow-up triage for the final 11 case files. This took place in June, right at the end of the school year. We found triage to be a huge success, especially the ability to communicate across agencies, to share expertise and coordinate case management plans for each young person and their family. We started youth and family case management directly after triage. BGCO took on 13 files. That's the majority of cases, and that's due to the capacity for us to provide full-time case management devoted to upstream. This was a big learning for us, as we found allocating funding to upstream devoted personnel was most advantageous to providing quality and consistent services to young people and their families. Kelowna Friendship Society took the next highest caseload due to the 33% of consenting students who identified as Indigenous. We have gone on to provide a wide variety of support. We have been able to mediate conflict in homes, assist young people in managing anxiety, connect young folks to mental health supports and life skills training opportunities. That's just to list a few. All right, where are we at currently? We are into the second implementation of our pilot year, with one full implementation completed and a run through straight from planning to facilitating the assessment to check-ins, triage, and case management. We were so much better equipped for our next implementation at our second school this fall. We are currently offering check-ins. Again, we had a great response. We had 95.6% response rate. 63 students, or 43%, were flagged with risk. This time with similar numbers in tier 3, but nearly 3 times as many in the second tier. Today, we look forward to revisiting the roles and expectations of our stakeholders, refining them and assuring quality and consistency across services, as well as to improve our ability to track progress across support systems. We continue to seek sustainable long-term funding with hopes to double our capacity for the next 4 years. We look forward to utilizing the evidence gleaned from our work to advocate for necessary change in our community. Our first battlefront is looking to be how we might work across sectors to reduce barriers to accessing mental health support. All right, as for overarching successes and challenges, there have been so many of each. The success I'd like to highlight would likely be the strong relationships and commitment that we've built across sectors. And the challenge that we continue to face today and have faced from the beginning is around funding. However, we are dreaming big and we're in it for the long haul. We are following in the steps of Upstream Australia and hope to build on the number of stakeholders in our project to spread upstream across all schools in our district and to ultimately embed prevention departments across all agencies. We are making the shift from intervention to prevention. That's where we're at. This is the Coles notes of how we've gone about adapting Upstream Canada into a local model. We invite you today to do the same in your own way. Reach out, ask questions. Upstream Kelowna is more than happy to share any tools and any learnings we've acquired and look forward to collaborating with you. Thank you for listening.